Welcome to Democracy Now!, democracynow.org, The War and Peace Report. I'm Amy Goodman. Israel's reportedly proposed halting its assault on Gaza for 2 months in exchange for the release of more than 100 hostages remaining in Gaza. According to Axios, the proposed deal would also involve the release of Palestinians imprisoned by Israel, but it would not end the war in Gaza. Axios reports Israel's given the proposal to Hamas through mediators from Qatar and Egypt. Separately, CNN reports Israel proposed allowing top Hamas officials to leave Gaza as part of a broader ceasefire negotiation. President Biden's Middle East coordinator, Brett McGurk, is in Egypt and will soon head to Qatar. This comes as Israeli Prime Minister Benjamin Netanyahu faces increasing political pressure to bring home the hostages. Earlier today, Israel announced 24 of its soldiers were killed in Gaza on Monday in the deadliest day for Israeli forces since Hamas attacked Israel on October 7th, bringing the number of Israeli soldier casualties to over 200. Meanwhile, the humanitarian crisis in Gaza continues to worsen. The United Nations is warning 570,000 Palestinians face catastrophic hunger. Health officials in Gaza say 195 Palestinians were killed in Israeli strikes over the past 24 hours. Israeli forces have reportedly surrounded the city of Khan Yunis while attacking areas where thousands of Palestinians have sought shelter, including at Al-Aqsa University. This is a Palestinian child who fled the school with his family.
We hardly made it out of the university under the shelling. We didn't expect the tanks at the university's gates. We hardly made it out. Every day I see children die. Every day children die. Many of my friends died last night at Al-Aqsa University.
According to the Gaza Health Ministry, over 25,000 Palestinians have died in Gaza, more than 10,000 of them children. In other news from the region, the 18-year-old Israeli war resister Tal Mitnick has been sentenced to an additional 30 days in military prison. Visit democracynow.org to see our interview with Mitnick last week. He's the first Israeli resistor in the Gaza assault. The U.S. and U.K. launched fresh strikes on 8 Houthi targets in Yemen Monday. It's the second time the two countries conducted a joint attack and the 8th strike by U.S. forces against the Iran-backed Houthi movement in Yemen over the past 2 weeks in retaliation for Houthi forces targeting ships in the Gulf of Aden and Red Sea to protest Israel's war on Gaza. Massive protests have filled the streets of Yemen since the foreign attack started and after the U.S. recently redesignated the Houthi movement as a terrorist group. This is journalist and activist Isa Al-Sayani.
We say to the United States that this classification will not cause the Yemeni people any fears regarding their support of Gaza. This classification is an evasion and cover-up by the United States and Israel for the crimes they committed against the Palestinian people.
Here in the United States, the Service Employees International Union, SEIU, has become the largest U.S. union to call for an immediate Gaza ceasefire. Union President Mary Kay Henry said, quote, SEIU's almost 2 million members believe that wherever violence, fear and hatred thrive, working people cannot, she said. Adding Israel must also, quote, end decades of occupation, blockades and lack of freedom endured by the Palestinian people. The U.S. Supreme Court has declined to hear a case brought against the organization U.S. Campaign for Palestinian Rights. The decision upholds lower court rulings that rejected baseless claims the Palestinian advocacy group provides material support for terrorism. The Center for Constitutional Rights, which represents the group, welcomed the Supreme Court move and said, quote, as the government of Israel is carrying out an unfolding genocide against Palestinians in Gaza, it's more important than ever that activists be free to speak out without fear, CCR said. In more Supreme Court news, justices agreed Monday to hear an appeal from Oklahoma death row prisoner Richard Glossip. He's maintained his innocence for over a quarter of a century after being convicted as the mastermind behind the 1997 murder for hire of his former employer, the owner of a motel Glossip managed. He's narrowly escaped execution 3 times. Oklahoma's Republican Attorney General, Gentner Drummond, has said Glossip's conviction should be vacated due to an unfair trial. In immigration news, the Supreme Court sided with the Biden administration, allowing Border Patrol agents to cut down razor wire put up by Texas troopers along its border with Mexico. Texas Governor Greg Abbott had previously ignored the orders to remove the wire, asserting state authority over the border area. New Hampshire voters are casting ballots today in the first primary of the 2024 presidential election. Former South Carolina Governor Nikki Haley appeared at a flurry of campaign events Monday in what analysts say could be a final attempt to shore up her campaign against frontrunner Donald Trump. On the Democratic side, President Biden will not be on the primary ballot after state Democrats went ahead with January primaries despite the DNC switching up the voting calendar to prevent Iowa and New Hampshire, for two of the whitest states in the country, from being the first to hold their primaries and caucuses. A write-in campaign for Biden still seeks to deliver the president a victory in New Hampshire. Meanwhile, organizers are urging Democrats to instead write in their vote as ceasefire to send a message to Biden over support for Israel's assault on Gaza. One presidential candidate who is on New Hampshire's Democratic ticket is author and activist Marianne Williamson. She'll be joining us to discuss her campaign later in the broadcast. The Biden administration announced new measures to strengthen access to reproductive care on the 51st anniversary of Roe v. Wade Monday. These include making contraception more accessible and free under the Affordable Care Act and ensuring hospitals provide emergency abortions nationwide. Both President Biden and Vice President Kamala Harris gave addresses Monday excoriating Republicans for their continued attack on abortion rights as Democrats seek to harness persistent voter rage over the Supreme Court's undoing of Roe v. Wade in 2022. This is Vice President Harris speaking from the battleground state of Wisconsin as she kicked off a national tour on abortion rights.
In the last 19 months, in states across our nation, extremists have proposed and passed laws that criminalize doctors and punish women. Today in America, 1 in 3 women of reproductive age live in a state with an abortion ban. 1 in 3.
In France, tens of thousands of people took to the streets in cities across the country on Sunday, urging President Emmanuel Macron to reject a hardline immigration bill. The measure strengthens deportation authority, makes it more difficult for non-citizens to access social welfare and other benefits. The legislation's been widely condemned as anti-immigrant amidst fears of a turn to the far right. This is a migrant worker from Mali at the rally in Paris.
Myself, for example, I work. I don't have social security or anything at all, even though I pay taxes. This is really difficult. When we work, we can be maltreated because we're afraid to lose the jobs that we have. And then when we work, the overtime hours that we do can go unpaid. And we can't complain. You complain, you get fired.
In Illinois, at least 8 people were found fatally shot at 3 separate locations in the city of Joliet Sunday and Monday. The suspected gunman fled to Texas, where police said he shot himself after a confrontation with law enforcement Monday evening. One of the victims was a 28-year-old Nigerian immigrant who'd been living in the U.S. for about 3 years. There's been at least 24 mass shootings in the U.S. just in the first 3 weeks of this year, according to the Gun Violence Archive. Dexter Scott King, the youngest son of Dr. Martin Luther King Jr. and Coretta Scott King, has died of prostate cancer at 62. He served as chair of the King Center, where he dedicated his life's work to preserving and sharing the legacy of his parents, inspiring young people to continue working toward justice and equality. And in California, faculty at Cal State University, the country's largest public university system, are returning to the classroom today as they reach a tentative agreement late Monday after just a one-day strike. The deal grants pay raises and extended parental leave, among other things. The California Faculty Association Union celebrated the deal, posting on social media, quote, "In case anyone forgot, strikes work." And those are some of the headlines. This is Democracy Now!, democracynow.org, The War and Peace Report. I'm Amy Goodman in New York, joined by Democracy Now! Co-host Juan Gonzalez in Chicago. Hi, Juan.
Hi, Amy, and welcome to all of our listeners and viewers across the country and around the world.